Hello, thank you for tuning into my channel. It's assignment 4 of our Heartbeat Bargello Quilt Along. So if you want to see how to make section 1 of our quilt, please stay tuned. Okay, so we're at the point in making the quilt that I am starting to get very excited. So far, we've chosen our fabric. We've cut the fabric into 2.5-inch strips. We have created strip sets out of those strips, and we have cut the strips sets into strip units. So now we're going to get ready to make the sections. First, I want to show you everybody's cut strips. Of course, you can't really see anything, but I want to show them. We did have some new folks join us in the quilt along, so I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to share that right now. At the end of the video, stay tuned to see who won our prize this month. This month, the prize is going to be this Cozy Quilt Designs pattern. It's called Sea Stars, and I can't wait to give this away. The first time I made this quilt, I didn't set it up like this. I did, instead of doing all of one step, I actually made like 1 or 2 strip sets and then cut those down into strip units and went ahead and made a section. And so I had to keep going back and making strip sets until I had it all done. I like this way a little bit better because we have all of one step done. Once I get started in this step, I really don't have to go back and make another strip set unless I need one for the border. I will go over first what we need for this step. From the pattern, you are going to need your fabric guide, okay? And you need the instructions for section 1, the cutting directions for section 1, and they're on pages 7, 8, and 9 in the pattern. Okay, you're also going to need a pencil. I need to grab a pencil or something to mark your pattern so that when you have it, when you've completed that particular cut. Okay, I'm going to put the rest of my pattern away because I don't need it right now. You also need your strip units that you've already cut, and I have mine here, and they're in order from the largest strip to the smallest strip to make it easier to pull. So 3, 2.5, 2, 1.5, and 1 inch. And the last thing you're going to need is your seam ripper, and I have one here. Depending on your stitch length, you may get away with using a bigger one, but mine is pretty small, so that I can easily cut the thread in between the seams that we need to cut from. Okay, so I need to grab a pencil, and then we'll get started with this step. I've tried to zoom in a little bit, so hopefully that will help us to see what I'm doing. You are going to need a pretty big surface to work for this step, because when you lay it out, it's going to be pretty big. And I'm going to lay out the whole section before I start stitching it together. I have my fabric guide out because that's going to be important. I need to know what seams to cut through. Let me show you where I have my fabric. My fabric guide is over here on the left. Then I have the cutting directions and then I'm going to be laying my my units out to the right. If you're right-handed, you may have to swap the setup, but do what's going to work best for you. Okay, and now it's time to get started. I'm going to hold the pattern up kind of close so you can see it. So this is for section 1. Your pattern does have a picture of it here. So I'm going to start with cut number 1. It's a 2-inch cut, and I'm going to cut between seams 10 and 11. Okay, so cut 1, 2 inches between seams 10 and 11. So from this point, I need to first grab a 2-inch strip. Then I will use my fabric guide to find seams 10 and 11. Okay. And for me, it is these two. And I'm going to take my seam ripper and go ahead and just remove that seam. And I'm just pushing it up like every 3rd or 4th stitch. And then I pull it apart. One of the threads is usually all the way together, so I take that one out. I don't worry about the tiny threads yet. Okay, and so this is my my torn my removed seam, and I'm going to put the number on the right. That's going to be at the top. So here it says that number 11 is on the right. So this is the fabric that's going to be on the top. So for me, it's going to be this big gray rose, and I'll lay it out here. Okay. After I have it laid out, I'm going to mark it. I just put a little circle beside it so I know that I've completed that seam. Let me show you that up close. Okay. And for me, all of the ones on the right, that's the fabric that's going to go on top. That's what's going to create the pattern. Okay, you can do whatever works for you, but whatever it is, it needs to be consistent. So if you decide seam 10, that fabric is going to be on the top, then it needs to be all the ones that are on the left. And I've only done it with the one on the right at the top, so I don't know if that would change the look or if you just need to flip it over. I'm not sure. Okay, so next I'll go to the next seam, 2.5. It's cut 2. It's a 2.5-inch strip cut between numbers 11 and 12. Pull it through. So 11 and 12. So it's the gray rose and then this darker gray fabric. Same thing. Take the seam out. And then open it up. Okay. This time it's going to be fabric 12 that's at the top, and this is my fabric 12, so it's going to the top. All right. And when I put these all together, this is going to be how I stitch them as well. All right, so let me do a few more, and then I'll come back on camera when I'm maybe about halfway done. I'm not quite halfway done yet with my section, but there are a couple things that I want to remind you of during this process. If you notice, when we cut the strip units, these are wrong side together, and if you look at mine, you can tell that some of them kind of look similar from the back, from the wrong side, I should say. So if you get confused, don't forget to flip it over, because this is what your fabric guide looks like, the right side of the fabric. So try not to make that mistake. Go ahead and flip it over just to make sure that you're cutting between the right seams. But if for some reason you cut between the wrong seams, there are a couple of options. One thing, you just resew it back into the correct, resew it and then cut the correct one. But if you have these 1-inch strips, there are a ton of them. This is one that I cut the wrong way. I think I was supposed to cut it between 10 and 11 or something, but I cut it between 11 and 12. So what I did is I just marked where I cut it and stuck a pin in it because I know that I'm going to need this one anyway. So I didn't worry about stitching it back and cutting it. I just labeled it and got a new one because I'm about to need it again anyway. These are just a couple of hints to help you through it. Another thing is, even though I wrote the pattern, sometimes I think that it's supposed to turn already. Like after I finish the big strips, I feel like it's supposed to be turning and going the other way. But that's not right. Okay, so if you panic, don't worry because it's not supposed to turn yet. This is perfect. It's not going to turn until the numbers start going in the opposite direction. So don't worry. I had to tell myself, trust the process, even though I wrote the pattern. So I'm going to finish laying this out and I'll show it to you when I'm done. I have the whole section laid out right here. I only did my sections one at a time, and I've only done 2 sections right now. So it's time to start stitching it together, and I'm going to start with 3 pins. I like to use pins to help me stay organized, and so I'm going to start by putting 3 pins in. I'm going to put 1 pin at the first section. Let me show you that. Okay, so this first section has a pin, and then I'm going to put 1 in the 3rd section. And then I'm going to put 1 in the 5th section. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the first pin is going to stay there the entire time that I'm stitching this section. And the other 2 pins are going to move because as I go further down the section, I'll be putting those on the upcoming sections. The pins tell me what the left side of whatever I'm stitching. So for example, this first pin, it's going to be on the left, and I'm going to stitch the first strip unit to the 2nd strip unit. Okay? And then so the same for these and these. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine so that we can see how this starts to come together. Before we start stitching, I actually want to go over the pressing of the seams. You want to think about that before you start putting your strip units together. And this is section 1, but this is the top section. And for these, I'm going to flip it up. I've pressed the seams to the right. So if you can see that all of the seams are going to the right. Okay, the next section, and I can tell the difference because for this one I put 1 pin, but for the 2nd section I actually have 2 pins. So I use pins to try to help me stay organized. As I said, this is section 2. These seams are going to the left. I don't know how well you can see. I want to zoom in so you can see. There they are. That those seams are going to the left. When I do the 3rd strip set, I'm going to do those back like the first set. So the first set will be going to the right. That way when we go to join these seams, and we're going to be joining them horizontally, the seams are going to nest. Alright, so keep that in mind when you're putting your strip units together to make your section. Go ahead and plan however you want to press the seams. If you're going to press them open, that's fine, but it's going to be, to me that seems like more work, but try it out if you think that'll work. But I like doing it this way because it's easy for me to nest. So you have one set of seams going to the right, others going to the left, and so on, just so that the seams will nest. Now we can get to stitching. Machine, and I have my first two pieces here. If you'll remember, we stitched these and we pressed towards the even fabrics, and so when I put these together, they're actually going to nest. You can see that this seam is going down and the other seam is going up. Okay, so this one is my left seam, my left fabric. I usually put that one on the bottom, and then I put the next one on the top, and I'm just going to stitch all the way down, nesting the seam. So let me do that, and then I'm going to show you what is next. For the next step, I still have my first two strip units stitched, and then I grab the second two. Again, you can see that my the pin is on the left side, and I'm going to go ahead and stitch the next piece. I prefer to do these by chain piecing. I think it makes it a little bit easier. So now I'm going to go ahead and stitch this one, these two together, and then I'll be able to show you how to do the finger pressing. Alright, so I'm going to take the first unit, or the first little piece area off of my sewing machine, and since this is block unit section number 3, I'm actually going to finger press to the right. So I'm opening out, and then I'm just kind of stretching the fabric just a little, not stretching it, but trying to open that seam out as much as possible, and then doing a little finger press in between each stitch. And while I'm doing this, there's another thing that I want to show you. This is, if you'll remember, the seam between section or fabric 1 and fabric 14, we didn't press that seam. So when you're stitching, just go ahead and manually guide it up so that it's pointing toward fabric 14. That's going to ensure the nesting. You can see it. It's nested right here. So just make sure whenever you get to that one, put it towards fabric 14. It's really not that difficult to do as you're stitching. So I'll finish finger pressing this, and I'm actually going to put it back with the other fabrics. I just kind of put it over to the left to get to the next area. So let me do that, and then I'll show you how I deal with the rest of this. The first two units have been stitched together, and the third is actually over on the machine. But I want to show you how I make this transition. I'm about to sew these two sets together. I'm going to flip this, the one on the right here. I'm going to flip it over, right sides together. But first I'm going to move my pin to the next open strip unit, so that I maintain those pins on the left side. And so I'll be making these steps each time. So each time I'm going to flip over to stitch to this unit, and then I'll move my pin so that I can maintain that position on the left. So I'm going to do that, and then I think I'll go about halfway down, and I'll show you what it looks like. My block is about halfway done, or I should say my section is about halfway done. I've started from the wider strips, and now I'm on these 1-inch strips. I'm getting a little bit concerned. I wasn't worried about this for my other blocks, but you can see that these blocks are about to start finishing a little bit further down each time. So I'm going to try and reverse the direction that I stitch and see if that helps. But I'm going to finish up the section, and then I'll show you what it looks like. That's about how much I have left. This is our completed panel. I have to press it, so I'm actually going to press it 3 times. Once from the front, then I'm going to turn it over and press it and make sure these seams all lie flat, and then I'll turn it back over and press it again from the front. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll lay it out with all 3 pieces so we can see how they come together. I have my pressed section right here. This is the one I just did. And then over here I have the other two. Now the only thing I need to do is start stitching the horizontal seam so that I have 3 units sewn together. So I'm going to do that, and then this section will be done. These are all of the completed sections sewn together, and I don't know if you can tell where one stops and where the next one starts, so I'll show you. It's this seam right along here, and this one right along here. And I've pressed each of these seams up to the top, pointing toward the top fabric, and that way when I do the next section, I'll press those joining seams going down, again to get the nesting. If you have any questions about this process, please leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to make your sections. If you're making a lap quilt, you're making 2. If you're making the twin or the full queen, you're making 3. Post it to the Facebook group. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.